So it's difficult to put into words how humbled I am to be with you today and to have received the warmest of welcomes to Abuja. Thank you so much for the Husky Satumari Foundation for this very, very kind invitation. And to the East Africans, East Africans I usually start every speech or talk that I do with trying to describe myself. And I do this because in our community as VIPs, it's an inclusive practice to do. So, by way of audio description, my height is about 5'8". I'm a black African woman from Kenya. I wear my hair natural. As you can see, it's in braids today and tied back. Today I'm also wearing a sleeveless African print outfit with a top and its matching trousers, purple and pink. And I've got dangle earrings, which are also pink in color. I've got a watch on my left wrist, and I'm wearing open-toe black shoes. And I would encourage you from here moving on, if you can, and when you meet a visually impaired person like myself, try to describe yourself to them so that they can see who is addressing them in their mind. So being a young black woman and a leader with a disability in the global south has been quite a whirlwind, if I'm being honest. And even though it's been tough, the experience has given me building blocks that I wouldn't have otherwise had and changed how I view life completely. Since high school, I had been losing my eyesight, very slowly and very gradually. And at the time, I had no idea why. Glaucoma wasn't a word that I had ever heard before, but quickly learned that it is known as the secret thief of sight because of its insidious nature. I was told that my glaucoma had already caused a lot of havoc in my optic nerve at the back of the eyes, and that they would not be able to stop its progression. That it's more aggressive in black Africans because of the color of our dark eyes, and that I'll probably be blind by the time I'm 25 years old, which, as you can see, happened. This is not the kind of thing a kid imagines they would be told, of course, especially not at the beginning of their lives. The biggest dream I had back then was to be nothing more than a famous musician and actress, meeting fans and having them sing my lyrics back to me. I never imagined that God would throw me such a painful yet deeply purposeful curveball like acquiring a disability, let alone being elevated across the world like this. And even when I started my advocacy work many years ago, it was purely from the profound frustration, discrimination, and disregard I was personally experiencing because of being a young woman with a disability in Africa. My eyesight wasn't every year. My CV would get me into job interviews, but when they saw me and my disability, nothing I said could convince employers that I could do the job I said I could. Then my friends started to disappear, and I became a shell of myself at only 20 years old, whilst my peers were propelling forward in their lives. As human beings, why is it that we always see amazing things happening for other people, but for some reason we do not dare think about it for ourselves? But now I see the gift I was given, to be able to live on both sides of the coin, with sight and now without. I believe I was given this mountain to show others that it can be moved. To be recognized for my work here today is truly amazing, but it also affirms that absolutely anyone is a candidate for the kind of success that breaks barriers, and that young and even the most unlikely people like myself can also create impact on a global stage if given the opportunity. It epitomizes the boundless prospects that youths in Africa and those with disabilities and women whose potential is too often overlooked, that they can do it as well. We just need a level playing field to play. So, why did I start call myself a VIP? How I coined that term over 15 years ago is It's a story that makes me really smile. I was living and studying in the UK at the time, and I remember going into the tube. And when going into the tube, there was a office at the top when you're buying your tickets before going down to underground, who saw me struggling to buy my tickets, and he came over to help me because I'm visually impaired. And he called on his walkie-talkie to the other side where I was going to alight, which was Chalk Farm in London. And he said, we have a VIP who's coming through to Chalk Farm, sure, make sure that you're, whatever he said. And I asked him later, what does VIP mean? And then he said, it means visually impaired passenger. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds quite empowering. It's better than calling me challenged or calling me sick or giving me a pitiful look as a person with a disability, isn't it? So when I came back to Kenya after finishing my time in the UK, I decided I would embody that term, not a visually impaired passenger, but a visually impaired person. And as you have heard from Asige, now a visually impaired parliamentarian. It all seems to work. This orbits around the idea of being different, standing out, leading with vulnerability, because playing into our fears does not serve the world at all. Have you ever heard the saying that he who fears he will suffer already suffers what he fears? That is by Michel de Montaigne. Having a disability entails an ongoing dance of denial and acceptance, predominantly a mental battle between the authentic me and the palatable me. From so early on, my condition showed me such profound learnings, such rich lessons about life by the time I was only 20 years old. But classic human nature still pushed and pulled me between the personal me and the public me. Because it is one thing to go blind, but it is quite another to go blind in a society that clings on discrimination, riddled with traditional prejudices. And I know that we all know it here in Nigeria too. Disability, in all honesty, had me suicidal because dashed hopes weighed heavily on me. But the real game changer was my shift in mindset. There are moments when you feel like shrinking, blending into the crowd for safety. But embracing boldness has brought me to this very room, speaking to all of you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And it's very easy to succumb to feelings of being small, to cower, but without boldness, I wouldn't have journeyed to this place in my life where I would, with every breath, advocate for groundbreaking laws in the Kenyan parliament. Laws that I'm confident will shape the lives of many generations to come behind me. I heard someone say that it is a sin if God has told you to fly and you decide to walk, because true humility is not standing at the back of the crowd, but being whoever God has called you to be at any particular time. That really hit me when I heard it, and I hope that you can take that away. Choosing not to hide behind my disability and instead raising my voice allowed me to push boundaries. It led me to create music that brought me into the spotlight in Kenya and East Africa and caught the attention of my political party, ODM, that saw me fit to be a member of parliament representing them. Through unwavering boldness, I have already garnered recognition as one of Kenya's top performing senators for 2 consecutive years. And last year, honored by New York's Time magazine on their list of top 100 influential leaders of the next generation. So yes, I agree my story is incredibly unique. I never had a blueprint to emulate because I have never found another story quite like this one. But perhaps the reason they are missing is because the world is yet to see all there is to be seen in the underdogs like us. That's why we're here talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Disability. Let me delve deeper into this. Imagine the transformative impact of having more people like me in leadership positions here in Nigeria. With over 1.4 billion people worldwide living with some form of a disability, including an estimated 15 million here in Nigeria alone, our representation in decision-making is not just important, it is essential. The unique perspectives that we bring are invaluable in shaping policies, development, and societies that work for every single person. However, the adoption of inclusive practices across many African nations remains slow, perpetuating the marginalization of our community and overlooking our valuable expertise. As a result of this, our unique perspectives are often disregarded, leading to a significant gap in representation, policy making, and innovation. Let me talk to you about innovation for a second. Do you know how text messaging was born? Anyone? Your Excellency? Let me tell you how text messaging was born. It was actually an innovation created because there was, in the 1970s, a man who had a friend who was deaf, and they could only text when they communicated on the old phones, right? And so this man decided, how can I better communicate with my deaf friend? And he went on ahead and innovated a way or a feature in the phone that can create short messaging, which is the SMS system. And that's how text messaging was born. And now every single one of us, whether deaf or not, use text messaging as if it is our lifeline, isn't it? That's called inclusive design, whereby somebody has a problem, but the solution serves absolutely everyone, right? The same kind of examples you will find in the automatic car, which is a solution for somebody who wasn't able to use his legs, and so they created the automatic car so that he could use his crutches just to push the accelerator and the brake from where he was sat. Also, the electric toothbrush is an innovation that stemmed from a person with disability, lessened mobility in her wrists, and her husband created the electric toothbrush. The remote control for the TV, so that visually impaired people like me don't have to walk up and touch anything on the screen. That was also an innovation made from disability. So many of them that we all use and know very well today. And in Kenya, the only reason that our PWD Act of 2003 came to be was because our former and late president, Mwai Kibaki, actually acquired a disability within his term in office. He wasn't disabled when he went in, but he became a wheelchair user whilst he was serving. And that's when he realized how inaccessible his own country was for him as head of state. And so this led him to encourage and push legislators to fast track the drafting and ascension of the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003. That was when he was there. And that's because he had a disability. And I'm not saying that we should wait for legislators in this room to gain a disability so you can start legislating for us. But all I am saying is it is the person that wears the shoe that knows where it pinches the most. These gaps in diversity, equity, and inclusion are not confined to a single nation, of course. They are prevalent across jurisdictions worldwide, including here in Nigeria and Kenya and beyond. In both Kenya and Nigeria, we continue to face systemic barriers that hinder our full participation in political, social, and economic life as PWDs. Despite legal frameworks designed to promote inclusivity, enforcement remains very weak, leaving us marginalized in key areas such as politics, employment, education, healthcare, and socio-protection. The political landscape remains impenetrable for us, with us struggling to gain leadership skills and positions, influence party policies, or participate meaningfully in governance. Political parties often sideline disability issues instead of integrating us into broader political discussions, limiting our ability to advocate for both disability rights and where governance are concerned. The restrictive mindset of the political class, thinking that we should only engage in disability matters over there, prevents us from taking up our leadership roles in other very critical sectors. We shouldn't be segregated because disability is not the most interesting thing about us. In Kenya, there is a constitutional requirement for 5% representation of PWDs in appointive and elective positions, but that remains unmet. It's a good initiative, but it does remain unmet, unfortunately. And I did some research for here in Nigeria. And I found that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Act of 2018 acknowledges the need for political inclusion, but has had no real impact due to poor enforcement and lack of political goodwill, is what I have researched. You can correct me if I'm wrong later, behind the tent. And in Kenya, we even face more barriers when we step forward to contest in elections. We face significant financial barriers, as political campaigns, of course, require substantial resources that many of us can't actually access. Beyond contesting for office, many of us struggle to exercise our fundamental right to vote at all, with inaccessible polling stations, rough terrains, lack of ramps, and the absence of voting materials in accessible formats, such as Braille or large print. This excludes us from the democratic process of voting. No sign language interpreters and assistive devices also discourages voter participation by PWDs, making elections very exclusionary rather than inclusive. For those of us who miraculously manage to secure seats in politics, the next hurdles are active participation in the actual governance work itself. Government buildings lack necessary infrastructure such as ramps, lifts, and assistive technologies to help us as parliamentarians, making it difficult for leaders with disabilities to effectively perform our duties, both in Parliament and in our constituencies. Ironically, we fight to make it into leadership positions only to get there and face the same exclusionary practices we sought to dismantle in the first place. This challenge is even greater for us as women with disabilities, who endure compounded discrimination, facing cyberbullying and gender-based violence and all types of visceral and violent abuse because of our disabilities. Our challenge extends beyond politics, however. Education remains a critical area where we continue to be left behind in Kenya, just as in Nigeria. Schools are inaccessible. Inadequate learning materials, a shortage of special needs teachers, and insufficient inclusive infrastructure. Many learners with disabilities drop out due to these barriers, limiting our chances of acquiring skills necessary for economic independence later in life. So you see, the cycle is very, very limiting for us. In Nigeria and Kenya alike, despite policies aimed at inclusive education, implementation remains weak, with most schools lacking the facilities to accommodate students with disabilities. Special needs programs are spectacularly misunderstood and underfunded, while mainstream schools are ill-equipped to support us with disabilities. We also face significant discrimination in the job market, of course. In Kenya, our constitution, I said, mandates that at least 5% of jobs in public and private sector ought to be reserved for PWDs. But enforcement is very poor. Similarly, I see in Nigeria, in your Persons with Disabilities Act of 2018, mandates workplace inclusion, yet implementation, when I talk to PWDs, seems to still be weak. Employers in both countries routinely ignore these legal provisions, unfortunately, leaving many of us jobless or disproportionately underpaid. Without proper enforcement mechanisms and accountability, economic independence stays out of reach for us. Access to healthcare is another major challenge. Many health facilities are not disability-friendly at all, with physical barriers such as lack of ramps and inaccessible washrooms make it difficult for us to receive quality medical care. Additionally, healthcare providers are often not trained to cater to our unique medical needs. While Kenya has introduced some disability-inclusive health policies, which is great, implementation, again, is very inconsistent. Nigeria seems to face similar struggles where we are often unable to access basic medical care due to financial constraints in the absence of disability-conscious medical services. Social protection is one of the most overlooked areas for us in both Kenya and Nigeria. Many of us and our caregivers live in poverty due to limited employment opportunities and the high cost of living with a disability. In Kenya, whilst cash transfer programs do exist, they are irregular, unfortunately, and underfunded in the national budget and fail to reach all intended beneficiaries. And similarly, in Nigeria, I see that while the law recognizes for social support, weakened enforcement and inadequate funding mean that most of us do not receive the financial assistance that we need to survive. Without well-structured and adequately funded social protection programs, we remain highly vulnerable to economic hardships, making it nearly impossible to break the cycle of poverty within the PWD community. So, to address these systemic underrepresentation in leadership, political parties must adopt affirmative action policies here in Nigeria that ensure our inclusion in party structures and election lists. That's what I would encourage. Further, you must introduce financial support mechanisms such as dedicated campaign funds for PWDs, reduced or waived nomination fees, and access to party funding for those of us seeking elective offices in Nigeria. Away from political participation, and now to governance. The ministry responsible for social welfare and inclusion in Nigeria, which I believe is the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, must also establish strict monitoring mechanisms. This includes things like mandatory annual audits to assess disability mainstreaming compliance in the country, public reporting to enhance transparency in the country, and clear penalties for non-compliance to hold institutions accountable. Additionally, a centralized database that tracks disability inclusion in workplaces would also help identify gaps and guide necessary interventions by policymakers in the room. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's turn to laws and regulations that pertain to transport and the built environment, which somebody also mentioned earlier. With the prevalent notion that accessibility is just providing ramps and lifts, that is very, very small-minded and dangerous. Without educating each other on what universal design features are and how they should make it into policy, we are running the risk of forever believing that accommodative to persons with disabilities means just building a simple ramp or just installing the cheapest lift in the market because, hey, that's all we need, right, to be compliant, right? Wrong. It's wrong. As an inclusive transport mobility practitioner myself, I would take you into a quick universal design class if there was time, but there isn't. The built environment should be meticulously designed and constructed and maintained to ensure safety. In my world of inclusive transport and mobility, orientation specifically means the ability to navigate, identify potential hazards, and determine when one has reached a destination. If PWDs cannot do these three things, then your transport systems and the built environment is non-inclusive. Right, so since arriving in Abuja just a few days ago, I couldn't help but mentally audit the buildings and streets that I've used so far. I've experienced a concerning lack of accessibility, unfortunately. And if Abuja, the capital city of Nigeria, which ought to lead by example, fails to uphold accessibility requirements, then how can we expect other parts of the country to comply? That's my question. And that's the question I also put to all leaders in Kenya as well, so don't feel like I'm being biased. I'm certain that PWDs in Nigeria want and need to access parliament, courthouses, police stations, social centers, educational institutions. We want to access sporting venues, houses of worship, malls and supermarkets, cinemas and museums, cafes and restaurants, and even bars and nightclubs. It may be hard to believe, Your Excellency, but as people with disabilities, we don't only visit hospitals and therapy facilities. We want to experience everything. And freedom of movement should not be a luxury. It is an inalienable human right. Recognizing these systemic barriers, I have been at the forefront of advocating for stronger enforcement of disability inclusion through my Persons with Disabilities Bill of 2023 in Kenya, now on its way to becoming law very soon. This bill represents a significant milestone for us in Kenya, aiming to modernize outdated disability laws and ensure that our rights and needs are effectively protected from top to bottom. There are many salient features, and I would invite, if you have time, to go through the PWD Bill of 2023 that I am sponsoring. These legislative efforts are crucial, but laws alone are not enough. Real change requires action, whether through affirmative action policies or by actively encouraging us to apply for positions. Organizations and governments must step up. Inclusion matters, and it is long, long overdue. So, after all that, what the heck am I trying to say anyway, right? What I'm trying to say specifically to the legislators in the room, and please bookmark this in your mind, is prioritize and pass disability responsive laws. Please, on behalf of persons with disabilities, 15 million plus in your country. Some of you will remember yesterday when I told you about research that shows countries lose up to 10% of their annual GDP due to a lack of accessibility in different sectors. Can you imagine that? 10% of our annual GDP off the table. I can give you examples of so many jurisdictions, like in the UK, where it's said that they lose over £42 million per month by failing to provide options that are fully accessible for persons with disabilities. This underlines the long-term benefits that upfront investment to accessible transport and infrastructure and services can return to you if you prioritize them. Moving to women. Don't worry, ladies, we're here now. For the majority, yes. For the majority of recorded history, you will know that women have experienced restricted rights and legal status, hindering our participation in public life and many more. Just a few years ago, we were confined to subordinate roles in comparison to men. Speaking out assertively or deviating from traditional gender norms risked severe consequences for us. I could not stand in a room like this and speak. Otherwise, I would have been considered a heretic. I couldn't dress like a man in trousers. Otherwise, I would have been considered a rebel and hanged on the stake as a woman. It wasn't until the late 17th century that women gained the right to suffrage. The persistent struggle of women in Kenya, specifically over the last 3 decades, has brought about significant changes in our country. It is because of this ongoing fight that I can stand here today and speak freely without fearing repercussion. Yeah. And as we gather here today, okay, all right. I will try to move to land. Let me try and land. I want to, pardon me. So let me touch on youth as I land. You all know exactly what it was like being young, disruptive, and agitating for change. And you also remember what it was like being told no, being held back, with your frustrations forcibly repressed. But even your doctor and even your pastor will tell you that the repression of healthy anger disrupts the entire immune system. This is exactly what we see manifesting in Africa as we speak. I see bottled up frustrations disrupting long-standing systems because youth acutely understand that in order to build something that lasts, you must break down before you can build up. And isn't that precisely what Mother Nature shows us time and time again? Doesn't the seed that you throw into the ground have to disintegrate first before the flower blooms? Doesn't a caterpillar have to struggle its way out of a cocoon before becoming a butterfly? And doesn't thunder and rain come before the rainbow? The only problem is, in my opinion, that many of us want the rainbow but do not want to weather the rain. Africa's youth have a real shot at shaping the future, but all generations that are stuck in the past have to get out of the way. And please, tell them to take the status quo with them, because familiarity is not always brave, and similar is not always safe. I believe in creating opportunities where talent is unstifled by bureaucracy, innovation isn't dismissed as rebellion, and young voices don't have to scream just to be heard. We all know what happened last year. And I stood with the over 1 million of the most courageous protesters on the 24th of June in Kenya, and they know that I would do it over and over again, amplifying their voices, because the world needs a constant reminder that we are not just the leaders of tomorrow, but the force that is not interested to build for a place that we once began. We are interested in building for where we want to go. So, I'm trying to rush through into my conclusion. Throw out what's not necessary. So, right. My approach to legislation is anchored in all of these things I've talked about, to listening, to articulating, and bringing along every single person that I represent, because the experts don't sit in Parliament. Yeah? The real experts are our constituents on the ground. They know their problems, and therefore they know their solutions. It is incumbent on us to listen. Inclusion must be everyone's business, regardless of gender, disability, religion, geography, socio-economic standing, or political association. Because no one can intimately understand this exclusion better than an African. And people continue to reap the benefits from us, from keeping us divided, because what is divided cannot stand. For too long, we have been conditioned to accept colonial systems that exclude and undermine and control us. And guess what? Every system is designed to achieve its results, right? Ask yourself, is this system broken? Or is it doing exactly what it was designed to do by those who gave it to us? These are the ingredients that keep us acquiescent while receiving a drip feeding of information and ideas, which are designed to keep us enslaved, but this time with no visible ball and chains. Yesterday, in a conversation with His Excellency, former President Goodluck Johnson asked me if I believe democracy is working, and I responded by saying, perhaps not in the form in which it was handed to us. As a young person, of course, have my own philosophies, but let's look, for example, at Socrates' prediction of the fall of democracy. He says, democracy must fall because it will try to tailor to everyone. The poor will want the wealth of the rich, and democracy will give it to them. Young people will want to be respected as elderly, and democracy will give it to them. Women will want to be like men, and democracy will give it to them. He says foreigners will want the rights of the natives, and democracy will give it to them. Thieves and fraudsters will want important government functions, and democracy will give it to them. And at that time, he says, when thieves and fraudsters finally democratically take authority because criminals and evildoers also want power, there will be worse dictatorship than in the time of any monarchy or oligarchy. End of quote. If indeed this is a prognostication of what is to come, Your Excellency, then I would say that we shouldn't only watch out for criminals and evildoers, because fools are also an incredible threat to democracy. Numerous philosophers caution that more harm is done in this world by stupid people than by evil ones, because stupid people are blinded by certainty in their own answers. And it is when you're blinded by your own certainty, that you are the most dangerous, philosophers say. So take from that what you may. We're not here to beg for space as young people, as women, as PWDs. We're here to build it. The world tells us that we are incapable, yet it relies on us, and we will no longer be trapped in outdated structures that forces us into dependency. When it comes to challenges, as I close, I leave this with you. Consider that maybe you have been given this mountain to show others that it can be moved. When it comes to creativity, don't just think outside of the box. Think without one. And when it comes to perspective, remember, if all you see is what you see, then you do not see all there is to be seen. Thank you very, very much. Shukran.